Thank you. I was the number 4 of a family of 5 born in Mexico City. I was very, very close to my father, not so close to my mother at the time. I remember my mother always telling me how difficult I was because I never took no for an answer. At that time, I thought that was really a bad thing. Now, I honestly take it as a real compliment because not having taken no for an answer made me achieve things that maybe nobody else have achieved if I was a very easy person at the time. My father and I spent long hours talking, making plans, laughing, thinking of what I was going to do when I grew up. I knew he was never going to leave me. He was my role model. He was my hero. He worked a lot. He was a high executive on a telecommunication company. One day, after breakfast, because for him, breakfast and dinner were very important periods to spend time, quality of time with the family. That day, I would never forget the date, November 12th, Friday, November 12th, 1964. We were having breakfast, and he said that he was going to Acapulco for the NBC convention. He had decided that my mother was leaving on an earlier flight, so we were having this conversation, and I said, to be continued on Sunday. I left for school, came back, without knowing that that day my life was going to be changed forever. Because I found out that the plane he was traveling in had crashed and that my father was dead. That hero that was never going to abandon me left me. And I really felt completely lost, alone. You might think alone, you had 4 brothers and sisters. I did, but I really felt helpless and alone. My mother was 38 years old, my eldest brother 18, and my youngest sister 1. That day, I understood the word resilient and what it really meant. I had no option but to be resilient. My grandfather, my mother's father, took us under his wing. He was an amazing visionary person, amazing role model. He was very much into the art and the design. He showed us how to appreciate art, sculpture, the art of collecting. He became my second role model in life. Actually, I have a fun story to tell you. This is a story about Diego Rivera. I don't know if you know Diego Rivera. Diego Rivera and the period of the 30s and 40s in Mexico were a very important period in Mexico. The huge artists emerged. The big muralists like Orozco and Siqueiros were in the peak moment. So for Mexico was an incredibly important moment in art. Diego Rivera came to my grandfather's house to literally complain that my grandfather didn't have anything hanging in their walls. And he said, hey, why don't you have anything from me if you have paintings from Siqueiros and from Orozco? And my grandfather said, Diego, you know that in my house, the boss is probably in the kitchen or in the living room. The boss is not me. So he went to look for my grandmother and said, Mrs. Laura, what's happening? You don't have anything from me hanging in your walls, and you do have things from my colleagues, Orozco and Siqueiros. At that time, my grandmother smiling said, Diego, I don't like your paintings. I honestly don't like your little girls with such a sad face staring at me. And Diego smiling said, okay, so what would you like me to paint? And my grandmother went to the garden with Diego Rivera and said, how about some flowers? Why don't you paint some just flowers? And he said, okay, what kind of flowers would you like me to paint? And my grandmother looking at the garden said, how about calla lilies? And it was the time where Diego painted these amazing paintings by Diego Rivera, the calla lilies. And he became this incredible author of the series of the calla lilies that everybody knows. What does this have to do with my upbringing? I grew up with my grandfather. So at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I was staring at these 2 amazing paintings of the girls carrying these calla lilies. That made me appreciate art even more. I wanted to become a designer, which I did. My first job was in the editorial business. I always like to see what is missing in the world and try to fix it. At that time, I was very worried about the very young generation, the girls, the preteen girls, preteen Latino population, from 10 to maybe 14 years old. Nobody was paying attention to them. A lot of magazines went into my desk. Nobody was talking to them. Nobody was paying attention to them, yet I thought they were the ones that needed more care, more guidance. I stayed in the company for a couple of years in order to reach the position where I had more power to be able to create something. I finally was able to create the magazine I dreamt. It was a magazine especially for the young generation. Everybody thought I was crazy. They let me because as I told you in the beginning, I don't take no for an answer that easy. Finally, this magazine was created, and they thought it was going to last maybe a year, maybe 2 years. And what happened? 38 years later, now it's the #1 magazine in the whole editorial division of Televisa. I stayed there for a couple of years. I left the magazine up and running, and I followed my other passion, design. At that time, it wasn't easy for somebody to really pursue what I was aiming for. I wanted to set a company, a very vertical company that had design, architecture, interior design, and construction, all under one roof. I created Diarq, design and architecture. At that time, also Mexico grew exponentially in museums, galleries, art, as well as Diarq grew the same way. We created an amazing company. I was extremely happy, but I was just happy, not satisfied. Something was going around my head, on and on. So my question stayed, what was I doing to help Mexico? What was I doing to leave a legacy? What was I doing to help the young generation? And honestly, you cannot think of the young generation if you don't think in education, which to me is the key of everything. I always thought that education needed to change, especially in this time. Incredible companies were closing, like the example of Kodak that you all know. Other incredible companies were emerging and growing, companies that had creative people working for them. I do believe, I'm convinced that the world belongs to the creative people. But there was something missing, this line that was dividing the left and the right side of the brain. That line shouldn't exist. I think that creativity needs to be working hand in hand with business. I went to speak to many of the presidents of huge universities that I admired. They agreed, but they couldn't make the change. So I hired a diverse group of people that helped me, because nothing can be done alone. We were thinkers, academics, business people, and we worked for 8 consecutive years, creating this incredible model that nobody thought it would work. Actually, we even hired a market study company that told us, forget about it. This is not going to work. You're going to lose all the money, and nobody needs a university of creative people that are going into business, or business people that want to be creative. Either you go one side or you go to the other side. But we did believe that interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, and the brain needed to be a brain, not 2 sides of the brain. Finally, against all odds, we did open Centro. And we opened Centro knowing that we were doing the right thing, because we believe that the students needed to have the chance to know numbers, to know a business. You know, I had so many examples of creative students not being able to open a business, or creative students not being able to understand what a business model was, not being able to get funding for their own company, that I honestly didn't want that to happen. We also, at Centro, are very committed to sustainability. We think that the planet is tired, and we needed to teach with example. We built a fully LEED Platinum certified building, which for those who don't know what LEED Platinum is, it's all sustainable campus, 3 buildings inside and out, the only one of its kind in the world. We opened Centro after 8.5 years. Now we have 3,000 students. We have graduated 1,800 graduates. We have 8 undergraduate degrees, 18 graduate degrees, and 100 courses of continuous education. We teach interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, and 30% of the curricula is business. All the students know business even though they go into a creative career. But you know that a building doesn't mean anything. What really means is where your students are. We follow our students. Our graduates, most of them have their own company. They are hiring others. And if they don't want to have their own company, they are working with the top companies in the world. They are really making a change. These are the companies, or most of the companies that our students are working for. They're working for Google, they're working for Nike, they're working for the MoMA, they're working for 72 and Sony, they are working for Televisa. They are really making a footprint on the creative world and the business world. Now what is funny is that people in business are trying to come and show and tell us that they need to be more creative, and we know that that's the future of the world. On another hand, I always thought that my life would impact women. I have been a mentor, and I am still a mentor of different young women. I speak on forums regarding gender equality. That is something that I'm going to do all my life because I believe in gender equality. It's interesting because I am sure that nothing happens by chance. The more I speak and the more I've spoken, the more frustrated I got. And I think I act out of frustration. It's like my motor. And that was very important because when I was speaking, the more I spoke about gender equality, the more I spoke about empowerment, the more I spoke about getting a role model to women, the more I thought I was giving a recipe where no ingredients were to be found. Honestly, there is not a number that you can dial to get empowered. There is not a number that you can dial to get a mentor. And there is a number that you can get to get a role model. So I said, it is ridiculous that I'm telling all of these women to do something that they cannot find. At that time, I got a call from the Office of the President of Mexico asking me if I would be willing to represent the women in Mexico at the G20 in the W20 initiative. At that time, I thought, what am I doing there? I don't even belong to the government. I don't even have a political party. I don't belong to any political party. But thinking it twice, I thought, this is a great idea because not belonging to any political party gives me the freedom to really draft the proper document for the women in my country to do and to get what they really deserve. Thank you. Thank you. So after having gone to Turkey, China, Germany, and now Argentina, and with the passion that I have for education, I realized it was a perfect marriage for me to start my new project, which is Dalian Power. Dalian Power, it is a project that will help women to reach their full potential. We developed already 85 courses that will give the women the power they need to know that they can reach anything they want in life. And Dalian Power will not stay in Mexico. We are going to reach all the hemisphere at this time, from Chile to Canada. And hopefully, pretty soon, we will be able to get to Europe. I think that there is nothing worse than wanting to do something and think that you cannot do it because you didn't have the opportunity or you didn't have the proper training. I think the world needs to be measured by 100% and not by 50%. So to close my talk, I just want to tell you that I am fully convinced that nothing can be done alone. As I did at Centro, I had an amazing team that helped me to erase that line between the left and the right side of the brain. in Dalian Power, I'm going to need the help of many people, including all of you, to join forces to be able to erase that line between men and women, to help them walk together in the path of life and get equal opportunities to be able to get the best version of themselves. Thank you very much.